Hi there. Welcome to NapTime History channel. Tonight we're taking a gaslit stroll through Victorian London's most misunderstood profession. You're standing on the corner of Piccadilly and Haymarket at 2 in the morning, 1885, and the street is absolutely teeming with life, not the kind your history textbook mentioned. The gas lamps cast dancing shadows across painted faces and silk petticoats, while top-hatted gentlemen pretend they're just out for a very late constitutional. Trust me, you probably won't survive this walk with your Victorian sensibilities intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these midnight stories travel. Now, let's drift back in time. You adjust your coat against the October chill and step into the current of bodies flowing down Haymarket. The smell hits you first, coal smoke mixing with cheap perfume, horse manure, and that distinctly Victorian combination of unwashed wool and pomade. This is the Haymarket, what respectable folks call Hell Corner. Though the women working here have much more colorful names for it, you count at least 200 women in just this stretch alone, and historians estimate that on any given night, between 8,000 and 80,000 women are working London's streets. Nobody can agree on the exact number because, well, Victorian record keeping gets a bit fuzzy when it comes to activities that officially don't exist. A woman in an emerald green dress that's seen better decades brushes past you, and you catch her practiced assessment. Your clothes, your shoes, the way you walk. She's reading you like a bankruptcy notice, calculating whether you're worth her time. Evening, love, she says, her accent pure East End, despite the French perfume. Bit late for sightseeing, in it. You mumble something non-committal and she laughs, already moving on to better prospects. This is a business, after all, and time is money. The mainstream history books will tell you these women are all tragic victims of circumstance, fallen angels who strayed from the path of virtue. Your Sunday school teacher probably painted them as cautionary tales, corrupted souls spreading disease and moral decay through the empire's great capital. But here's the thing, you're watching Mary Sullivan, age 23, former match factory worker, negotiate her rate with the confidence of a Lombard Street banker. She's doing the math that every working class woman knows by heart. 12 hours in the match factory pays 3 shillings if you're lucky, and don't get phossy jaw from the phosphorus. 1 hour with a clerk from Cheapside, 5 shillings. You don't need a Cambridge education to figure out that equation. The gaslight flickers, casting your shadow long and strange against the sooty brick. A constable strolls by, his bull's-eye lantern swinging lazily. He knows exactly what's happening here. Hell. You watch him tip his helmet to a woman in burgundy velvet who slips him something that disappears into his pocket. The law says soliciting is illegal, but the law also says a lot of things that nobody seems particularly interested in enforcing at 2 in the morning. Historians still argue whether the police were complicit or just pragmatic. But standing here watching this little transaction, you're pretty sure it's a bit of both. You follow the flow of people past the Argyle rooms, where the music spills out onto the street, along with laughing couples. This isn't some hidden underworld. It's as much a part of London's nighttime economy as the theaters and taverns. A woman selling flowers, definitely just flowers, officer, calls out her wares while her friend sells something else entirely. The boundaries blur in the gaslight. Every third doorway seems to lead to a cigar shop or millinery that's mysteriously open at this ungodly hour. Here's a quirky detail your history professor definitely skipped. Many of these women are married. Yeah, you heard that right. That woman in the patched yellow silk? She's got a husband working the docks who knows exactly where she is tonight. They've got 3 kids to feed and rent to pay, and his wages won't stretch that far. Victorian marriage vows included, for richer or poorer. But nobody mentioned what happens when poorer means choosing between your virtue and your children's breakfast. You duck into a coffee stall to warm up, and the proprietor doesn't even blink when 2 women in obvious working attire order penny mugs. They're discussing the new beat constable like farmers discussing weather, professionally, pragmatically, with an eye toward how it affects business. One mentions she's saving to open a boarding house. The other laughs and says she's got enough put by to start a small shop, maybe millinery. But actual millinery this time. They're entrepreneurs in petticoats, and their business acumen would put many male merchants to shame. The coffee scalds your tongue, but you barely notice because across the street, you spot something that makes you do a double take. A well-dressed lady, and you mean actual lady, the kind with a carriage waiting, is deep in conversation with one of the working girls. They're not conducting business, they're chatting like old friends. Later, you'll learn these midnight meetings aren't uncommon. Sometimes it's former colleagues catching up, sometimes it's relatives. The line between respectable and fallen isn't a wall, it's more like a very permeable membrane. As you leave the warmth of the coffee stall, the city's contradictions wrap around you like the fog rolling in from the Thames. This isn't the simple morality tale you expected. These aren't fallen angels or brazen hussies or any of the other neat categories Victorian society desperately wants to squeeze them into. They're women navigating an impossible economy with the tools available to them. And honestly, they're doing it with more business sense than half the men in Parliament. The fog's getting thicker now, and you pull out your pocket watch, 2:30, through the yellow murk. You spot Sarah Bennett adjusting her boot outside a pawnbroker's shop that's conveniently still open. She used to work at Bryant and May's match factory until the phosphorus started making her teeth glow in the dark. No, seriously, Fossey Jaw made workers' jaws literally luminescent before it rotted them away. Now she's out here doing risk assessment that would make an insurance adjuster weep with envy. You've got to understand the arithmetic these women face. A factory girl in 1885 makes maybe 7 shillings a week if she's skilled, less if she's not. Rent for a single room in Whitechapel runs 3 shillings. That leaves 4 shillings for food, coal, clothes, and medicine for an entire week. A seamstress doing piecework might make even less, squinting by candlelight until her eyes give out, racing to finish enough shirts to afford tomorrow's bread. But one evening's work on these streets, that's a week's factory wages. Sometimes more. The math isn't just compelling, it's survival. Sarah catches you staring and mistakes it for interest. You look lost. Duck, she says, and there's something almost maternal in her tone, despite being maybe 20 years old. First time in the Haymarket? When you nod, she laughs. Thought so. You've got that "what would mother think" look about you. She's had already calculated you're not a customer. Wrong shoes, wrong attitude, wrong everything. But she seems happy enough to chat. Business is slow on foggy nights. People think we're stupid, she says, pulling her shawl tighter, like we just wake up one day and decide, oh, I'll go be a tart then, but I've got two younger sisters still at home. You know what they pay at the factories? Course you don't. She lights a cigarette with practiced ease. 6 shillings a week if you're lucky. And that's before they dock you for being 30 seconds late, for breaking a needle, for breathing wrong. Lost 2 days' pay once because I sneezed on the fabric. The economics get even more brutal when you factor in the fines. Oh yes, the factory owners loved their fines. Thread breaks, that's tuppence. Arrive 1 minute past the bell, threepence. Need to use the privy more than once in a 10-hour shift. That'll cost you by Friday. Many workers owed more in fines than they'd earned in wages. The match factory where Sarah worked charged girls for the brushes they used, the paste, even the string to tie the matchboxes. Historians still argue whether this system was designed to force women into Pr0stitution. But standing here listening to Sarah's accounting, the answer seems pretty obvious. A hansom cab rattles past, and you glimpse a well-dressed man inside, carefully not looking at the women lining the street. Sarah follows your gaze and snorts. That's Mr. Morrison. Owns 3 factories in Bermondsey, pays his girls 5 shillings a week, and acts all Christian about it. She takes a long drag. His wife thinks he's at his club. The hypocrisy is so thick you could spread it on toast. You're starting to see the cruel mathematics of Victorian women's work. A domestic servant might earn £8 a year. That's about 3 shillings a week, but she's expected to be grateful for the privilege of scrubbing floors 16 hours a day. A shop girl makes similar wages, but has to maintain a respectable appearance on that pittance, often going hungry to afford clean collars and mended gloves. One ripped dress could mean dismissal. And then what? The workhouse? The rivers, or the streets? Sarah's friend Emma joins you, and she's got the kind of cough that makes you instinctively step back. Don't worry, Emma wheezes. It's not the consumption, just the cotton dust from 10 years in the mills. So she's maybe 25, but looks 40. And when she smiles, you notice she's missing teeth. Lost these beauties to the factory diet, bread and tea and bread. Sometimes we'd have a herring on Sundays if we were flush, the quirky thing historians rarely mention. Many of these women are excellent accountants. Emma pulls out a small notebook where she's tracking her earnings, expenses, and savings with meticulous care. See here. She shows you. I've put away nearly £2 this month. Another year like this, and I'll have enough to start a coffee stall, proper one, with a license and everything. She's got business plans that would impress any banker. If any banker would actually listen to a woman, which they won't, because it's 1885 and apparently ovaries interfere with financial comprehension. A group of young clerks stumbles past. clearly deep in their cups, and both women tense. Drunk customers are unpredictable, might pay double, might cause trouble. Sarah makes a quick hand signal to someone you can't see in the fog, and you realize there's an entire communication network operating here. These women aren't working alone. They're part of a complex system of mutual protection and information sharing that operates completely outside the official channels. You want to know the real joke? Sarah asks, grinding out her cigarette. Half these toffs preaching about saving fallen women. They're the same ones who dock our wages at the factories. They'll stand up in Parliament talking about moral decay while paying starvation wages to thousands of girls. She laughs, but it's bitter as the fog. Then they act all shocked when we find our own way to make ends meet. The mainstream narrative says these women were forced into Pr0stitution by seduction, abandonment, or moral weakness. But you're watching Sarah and Emma run calculations that would make a Rothschild proud. They know exactly what their labor is worth in every market, factory, domestic, or street, and they're choosing the option that makes economic sense. It's not about fallen virtue, it's about rising rent. You check your watch again, nearly 3 now. The street's getting quieter as business winds down. Sarah and Emma are discussing whether to call it a night or try for one more customer. They're factoring in the weather. Fog means fewer customers. The competition, too many girls out tonight. And the police schedules, new constable comes on at 4, and he's less accommodating. This isn't desperation, it's the strategic business planning. As you prepare to move on, Emma calls after you. Oi, you writing about us or something? When you mumble something non-committal, she laughs. Well, get it right then. Tell them we ain't stupid. Tell them we can do arithmetic just fine. She pauses, then adds with a wry smile. Tell them we know exactly what our labor's worth. That's what really scares them. You drift deeper into the maze of streets behind the Haymarket, where the gas lamps thin out and the fog swallows sound. Here's where the real shock hits you. This world has more layers than a Savile Row waistcoat. You're about to discover that Victorian London's sex trade operates on a class system so rigid it would make the House of Lords jealous. At the top, you've got the courtesans. These aren't your average working girls. They're practically celebrities. Take Catherine Walters, known as Skittles, who keeps a house in Mayfair and rides in Hyde Park every afternoon on a horse gifted by a duke. She pulls in over £5,000 a year, which is more than most members of Parliament. You watch one of these elite women sweep past in a carriage that costs more than a factory worker sees in a lifetime. She nods regally to a group of street workers like a queen acknowledging peasants. And honestly, the metaphor isn't far off. The courtesans live in furnished apartments, wear Worth gowns, and attend the opera in the boxes. Mind you, not the stalls. They've got visiting cards printed on cream paper and maintain at-home hours like proper ladies. Some even publish memoirs that sell better than Dickens. The dirty secret that makes Victorian gentlemen squirm. These women often have better education and conversation than their wives. When you're paid to be interesting rather than just decorative, you tend to read more books, one tier down. You find the kept women. They're installed in discreet houses in St. John's Wood or Regent's Park by married men who visit on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. These arrangements run like clockwork, $300 a year, paid quarterly, plus expenses. The women maintain these households with middle-class respectability, complete with servants who politely pretend not to notice that the master of the house has another address entirely. It's bigamy with bookkeeping, and everyone involved treats it like a perfectly reasonable business arrangement. You duck into a music hall where the next tier operates. The actresses and dancers who supplement their stage earnings with selective companionship. That prima donna taking her bows? She's got 3 admirers bidding for her attention tonight, and she'll choose based on a complex calculation involving immediate payment, long-term potential, and whether the gentleman in question bathes regularly. These women occupy a strange twilight zone of respectability, celebrated on stage, condemned off it, but making more money than most Victorian wives ever see. The mainstream history loves to paint all Pr0stitutes with the same brush. But watching this ecosystem operate, you realize that's like saying everyone who works is identical just because they all need money. The dress lodger you meet outside the Alhambra Theater explains it perfectly. It's like any other trade. In it, you got your Harley Street doctors and your back alley bone setters. Same profession, different clientele. She's part of what they call the dress lodgers, women who rent fancy clothes by the night to work better areas. Her landlady owns a wardrobe that would make Liberty's jealous and rents out complete ensembles, silk dress, kid gloves, even paste jewelry that looks real in gaslight for 40% of the night's earnings. A factory girl transforms into a mysterious lady who just happens to be very friendly to gentlemen with full wallets. It's venture capitalism in velvet. Then you've got the accommodation houses, the Victorian equivalent of hotels that rent by the hour. Though they'd never be so crass as to say so, these establishments maintain different floors for different classes of trade. The ground floor might host women charging 5 shillings, while the upper floors cater to those who can demand a sovereign or more. The madam who runs one explains, while checking her account books, that she maintains strict standards, clean sheets for every visitor, no questions asked, and absolutely no rowing. This is a respectable, disreputable house. The quirky historical detail nobody mentions. Some of these madams become significant property owners. They're among the few Victorian women who control their own money, and they invest it shrewdly. One shows you her portfolio: 3 houses in Pimlico, shares in a railway company, and a tidy sum in consols. Men think we're too stupid to understand compound interest, she says, adjusting her respectable widow's weeds. Let them keep thinking that. Down another rung, you find the women working in the night houses, essentially pubs that stay open past legal hours through various transparent fictions. The proprietor of one such establishment explains that he's running a coffee house, though the coffee seems suspiciously similar to gin, and the waitresses offer more than table service. These women work on commission, earning a percentage of the drinks they convince customers to buy, plus whatever private arrangements they make. It's sales work with a side of scandal. The park women form another distinct group, working the royal parks after dark, Hyde Park, Green Park, Regent's Park, each has its own unwritten rules and regular inhabitants. These women often come from better backgrounds. You meet a governess who lost her position when the son of the house got too friendly, a shop girl dismissed for refusing the owner's advances, a widow whose husband's debts consumed his estate. They work the parks because it feels less public than the streets. Though the irony of conducting private business in public parks isn't lost on anyone. Historians still argue whether the specialization in Victorian sex work reflected women's agency or market forces. But standing here watching this complex hierarchy operate, you realize it's both. These women are responding to demand with remarkable business acumen. The courtesan who specializes in politicians knows exactly which clubs to frequent. The woman who caters to clerks positions herself near the commercial districts. It's market segmentation that would make modern advertisers weep with envy, near the bottom, and it hurts to even think in these terms. But this is how their world operates. You find the sailors' women around the docks, the soldiers' women near the barracks, and the threepenny uprights who conduct business standing in alleys because they can't afford lodging houses, even here. Though there's organization, they work in groups for protection, share information about dangerous customers, and maintain territories with the same fierce precision as any merchant. But the real shock comes when you realize who sits at the very bottom of this hierarchy. The women in the casual wards of workhouses who are given leave to earn their keep however they can. The workhouse guardians know exactly what this means, but it lets them keep the poor rates down. So they issue day passes with willful blindness. These women have to earn enough not just for food, but to buy their way back into the workhouse at night. Yes, you heard that right. They have to pay to sleep in the workhouse. It's poverty charging interest on itself. You're starting to feel dizzy from more than just the fog in the late hour. This isn't the simple morality tale of fallen women you expected. It's an entire parallel economy with its own rules, hierarchies, and brutal logic. From the courtesans in their Mayfair mansions to the desperate women in workhouse gray, they're all navigating the same impossible system, just from different rungs of a ladder that nobody admits exists. As you stumble back toward the bright lights of the Haymarket, a woman in modest but clean clothes stops you. You look like you've seen a ghost, she says, not unkindly. She's what they call a respectable, a woman who works just enough to supplement other income, maybe takes one or two regular clients. First time seeing how the other half lives? When you nod, she pats your arm almost sympathetically. It's not what they tell you in Sunday school, is it? We're not fallen angels or wicked temptresses. We're just women trying to survive in a world that offers us factory slavery or this, and between you and me. She leans in conspiratorially. This pays better. The smell of carbolic acid burns your nostrils as you follow Dr. William Acton into the Lock Hospital, the specialized institution for treating venereal diseases. It's 1885, and medical science is about as scientific as reading tea leaves, especially when it comes to women's bodies. The good doctor is explaining his groundbreaking theory that Pr0stitutes can be identified by the shape of their earlobes. Yes, you heard that correctly. Earlobes. Apparently, moral degradation manifests in dangling flesh. You bite your tongue to keep from laughing because this man is considered a leading expert. You see, Dr. Acton says, measuring a patient's skull with calipers. The Pr0stitute represents a distinct biological type. Her cranial development shows clear signs of arrested evolution. The woman being examined rolls her eyes so hard you're worried they might fall out. But she stays silent. Speaking up would only extend her mandatory detention. The Contagious Diseases Acts give doctors the power to forcibly examine any woman suspected of Pr0stitution and lock her up for treatment if infected. The catch? There's no reliable test for most diseases. So doctors just guess based on moral indicators, like wearing colorful clothes or walking alone after dark. The mainstream medical establishment insists that Pr0stitutes are walking pestilence, spreading disease throughout respectable society. But here's the thing. You watch Dr. Acton examine a woman with obvious syphilitic sores and declare her morally but not medically corrupted, while a perfectly healthy woman gets 3 months detention because she has the look of degradation about her. The look, it turns out, is poverty, malnourishment, exhaustion, and despair get misdiagnosed as moral contagion with alarming regularity. A nurse whispers to you that the real disease vectors are the men who visit Pr0stitutes, then go home to their wives. But nobody's forcing them to submit to genital inspection by strange doctors. We had a lady in here last week. She confides. Respectable married woman, covered in sores. Her husband infected her. But she's the one who got the mercury treatment until her teeth fell out. He got a prescription for nervousness and went on his way. The mercury treatment is a particularly brutal joke. Doctors prescribe it for everything from syphilis to hysteria, and it causes symptoms worse than most diseases: tremors, tooth loss, kidney failure, madness. You watch a woman trying to drink water with hands shaking so badly from mercury poisoning she can't hold the cup. The doctor notes this as moral trembling caused by her unnatural life. The medical ignorance is so profound, it's almost artistic. Doctors. Acton leads you to his consultation room, where the walls are covered with diagrams purporting to show the physical differences between virtuous women and Pr0stitutes. Apparently, fallen women have larger thyroid glands, thicker ankles, and a peculiar fondness for vinegar. They crave acidic foods, he explains solemnly, because their moral corruption creates an alkaline imbalance in their humors. You're pretty sure he just made that up, but he's writing it in a medical journal, so it must be science. The real kicker? These doctors believe Pr0stitutes are essentially a different species from respectable women. They claim Pr0stitutes don't feel sexual pleasure, making their work purely mechanical, can't form emotional attachments, and are incapable of being good mothers. One medical text seriously argues that Pr0stitutes' children are born with an inherited tendency toward vice, visible in their simian features and enlarged appetites. Meanwhile, you've met dozens of working women tonight who are supporting their entirely normal-looking children through their labor. You stumble across the work of Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell, the first woman doctor in Britain, who's actually bothering to ask Pr0stitutes about their health instead of just theorizing her findings. Most women in the trade are healthier than factory workers because they eat better and work fewer hours. The diseases they do contract come primarily from clients, not some inherent corruption, but her research gets dismissed as feminine sentiment by the male medical establishment. Here's a quirky detail that would be hilarious if it weren't so tragic. Victorian doctors believed that women's reproductive organs are directly connected to their brains, which is why thinking too hard makes women infertile and education causes hysteria. But somehow, Pr0stitutes' reproductive organs work completely differently. They're supposedly immune to pregnancy through frequent use, but also more susceptible to disease through the same mechanism. The logic pretzels these medical men twist themselves into would be impressive if they weren't destroying lives. A young woman named Alice is brought in for examination, and you watch the process unfold. The police surgeon, who has no specialized training in women's health, forces her to strip and submit to an invasive examination with unwashed metal instruments. She cries throughout, but tears are noted as another symptom of moral disease. When she tests positive for infection, based on criteria that seem to change with the doctor's mood, she's sentenced to 9 months detention for treatment. Her children, they'll go to the workhouse. Her job at the laundry, gone. When she gets out, what options will she have except returning to the streets? The Lock Hospital's own statistics reveal the farce. They claim a 90% cure rate, but that's because they only count women who complete treatment as cured, and anyone who leaves early or dies is listed as irregular discharge. You meet women who've been through the system multiple times, each round of treatment, leaving them sicker than before. One shows you scars from repeated caustic applications meant to burn away diseased tissue that was probably just normal anatomy the doctor didn't recognize. Historians still argue whether Victorian medical attitudes toward Pr0stitutes were based on genuine scientific ignorance or deliberate social control, but watching Dr. Acton prescribe bed rest and prayer for syphilis while dosing the patient with enough mercury to poison a horse, you realize it's both. The medical establishment needs Pr0stitutes to be diseased because it justifies their control over women's bodies. If Pr0stitutes are just workers, then examining them against their will is assault. But if they're walking contagion, it's public health. The most infuriating part? Some doctors know better. You find private physicians who treat working women with basic respect and actual medicine. They use clean instruments, wash their hands between patients, radical, and prescribe treatments that don't cause more harm than good, but they operate quietly, outside the official system, because admitting that Pr0stitutes deserve competent medical care would undermine the entire moral framework of Victorian medicine. As you leave the Lock Hospital, you pass a woman being dragged in by 2 policemen. She's shouting that she's a seamstress, just walking home late from work, but she's wearing a red petticoat, clear evidence of moral corruption. According to Dr. Acton's guidelines, she'll be examined, likely detained, possibly diseased by the very treatments meant to cure her, all in the name of public health and medical science. You're starting to understand that Victorian medicine isn't just failing these women, it's actively harming them while claiming moral authority. The real disease spreading through London isn't syphilis or gonorrhea, it's the toxic combination of medical ignorance, moral panic, and unchecked power over women's bodies. And unlike the diseases they claim to treat, this infection has no cure except time, education, and the radical idea that women, all women, deserve dignity and competent health care. You're standing outside Madame Elise's millinery shop on Bond Street at the fashionable hour of 3 in the afternoon, and something peculiar is happening. Lady Pemberton sweeps in wearing a striking purple walking dress with jet beading, the exact same design you saw on a Haymarket woman last month, just executed in more expensive fabric. The respectable ladies shopping here have no idea they're following fashion trends set by the very women they'd cross the street to avoid. The shop girl who helps Lady Pemberton knows the secret, though she used to work the Burlington Arcade until she saved enough to apprentice here. The ladies always want what's daringly continental, she whispers to you while wrapping a hat that's definitely inspired by the elaborate headpieces Pr0stitutes wear to catch the eye. They just don't want to know where the continental ideas actually come from. This is the dirty little secret of Victorian fashion. Pr0stitutes are the test market for every trend that eventually reaches respectable drawing rooms, those ankle-revealing shorter skirts that caused such scandal when fashionable women adopted them. Street workers invented them for practical reasons. Try climbing in and out of carriages all night in a crinoline, the rouge and powder that proper ladies swear they'd never wear. They're buying it in secret, following techniques pioneered by women who made their living being noticed. You watch a known courtesan named Violet examine gloves at the counter, and half the shop pretends not to recognize her while secretly noting every detail of her ensemble. She's wearing a bustle of moderate size, not the enormous shelf-like contraptions of 5 years ago, and within 6 months, every fashionable woman in London will have mysteriously decided that smaller bustles are more refined. The fashion magazines will credit Parisian designers, but Violet's been wearing this silhouette since spring. The mainstream fashion history completely erases this influence. But the evidence is right there in the shop accounts. Madame Elise does a brisk under-the-counter trade with unfortunate women who pay cash for the latest styles. They're her inadvertent advertising campaign when Cora Pearl appeared at the opera in a dress with silk flowers cascading down one shoulder. Orders for similar gowns flooded in from respectable clients who definitely weren't at the opera that night. Oh no, they just happened to imagine the exact same design. Here's the quirky bit historians tend to miss. Pr0stitutes essentially invented the concept of personal branding through fashion. Each successful woman develops a signature look. Maybe she always wears yellow, or carries a distinctive parasol, or pins fresh violets to her collar. It's marketing genius. Men seek out the woman with the scarlet boots, or the lady who wears camellias. Respectable women, meanwhile, are supposed to dress as indistinguishably as possible from their social peers. Guess which approach captures more attention? You follow the fashion food chain to a second-hand clothing shop in Soho where the cycle becomes even clearer. Working women sell their worn-out finery here, and respectable poor women buy it to remake into decent clothing. That silk gown that once graced the Haymarket gets transformed into a best Sunday dress for a clerk's wife, who has no idea of its scandalous history. The shop owner, Mrs. Cohen, finds this hilarious. Silk don't know if it's been sinful, she says, expertly evaluating a beaded evening cape. Good fabric is good fabric. The perfume counter at Rimmel's tells another story. The shop girl there explains that they stock two versions of many scents, one in elaborate bottles for display, another in plain vials kept behind the counter. Guess who buys which version? The plain bottles fly off the shelves to working women who know that smelling expensive is part of their trade. 6 months later, respectable women start requesting that exact scent, but in the fancy bottle. Naturally, the cosmetics situation is even more hypocritical. Officially, only Pr0stitutes wear visible makeup. Respectable women achieve their natural bloom through, through the exact same products, just applied more subtly. You watch a shop assistant demonstrate the art of invisible rouge application to a vicar's wife who swears she's buying it for her anemic complexion. The assistant, who learned her trade touching up working girls between clients, keeps a perfectly straight face. Then there's the underwear revolution that nobody talks about. Pr0stitutes pioneered practical undergarments, split drawers for convenience, shorter chemises that don't bunch up, corsets that actually allow movement. The fancy lingerie shops on Burlington Arcade are full of French designs that originated in London's night houses. When the Rational Dress Society starts advocating for reformed underwear in the 1890s, they're essentially promoting styles sex workers have worn for decades. You discover that some of the most successful fashion entrepreneurs in London are former Pr0stitutes who parlayed their style knowledge into legitimate businesses. They just lie about their backgrounds, and everyone politely pretends to believe them. That elegant French modiste with the shop in Belgravia, she learned her trade dressing for the Haymarket, but now she dresses duchesses who'd faint if they knew. The jewelry trends follow the same pattern. When diamonds become scarce due to political troubles in South Africa, clever working women start wearing paste gems that sparkle just as bright in gaslight. Suddenly, paste jewelry becomes fashionable among society women as amusing daywear. The women who wore it from necessity must find the irony delicious. Even hairstyles follow this trajectory. Those elaborate coiffures with false pieces that proper ladies wear to evening events. Pr0stitutes invented them because memorable hair attracts repeat customers. The crimping iron, marketed to respectable women as a tool for health-giving hair waves, was perfected in brothels where women needed to style their hair quickly between clients. Fashion always flows upward from the streets. No matter how much society pretends otherwise, you're examining a display of fans, essential accessories for any Victorian lady, when you notice the coded language they represent. Pr0stitutes developed elaborate fan signals to communicate with potential clients. Fan resting on right cheek means yes. On left cheek means no. Twirling it means follow me. Now, respectable women use the same signals for flirtation at balls, having no idea they're employing a communication system developed for commercial transactions. The color symbolism is particularly rich. Pr0stitutes adopt certain colors as professional markers: scarlet for boldness, yellow for availability, violet for discretion. Respectable society bans these colors for proper women, which only makes them more desirable. When the Princess of Wales appears in a yellow evening gown, it causes a sensation, and suddenly yellow is acceptable again. The fashion cycle spins on, powered by the very women society claims to shun. As evening approaches and the respectable shoppers head home, you see the night workers beginning their preparations. They're choosing costumes as carefully as any actress, understanding that fashion is their calling card, their advertisement, their armor. Tomorrow, the very women who clutched their skirts aside today will be secretly copying these styles, filtered through the acceptable lens of continental fashion. The truth is that Victorian fashion needs Pr0stitutes as much as Pr0stitutes need fashion. They're the laboratories where new styles are tested. The peacocks who display what respectable women desire but can't admit to wanting: every shortened hemline, every touch of color, every practical innovation flows from the streets to the salons, washed clean of its origins, but carrying the DNA of women who knew that visibility that meant survival. You climb the narrow stairs to Mrs. Fitzgerald's boarding house in Soho, and the smell of cabbage soup mixed with lavender water tells you everything about the delicate economics at play here. Mrs. F, as the girls call her, runs what's known as a accommodation house, not quite a brothel, not quite a regular lodging, but something infinitely more complex. She greets you at the door in a respectable black bombazine dress, looking every inch the widow she claims to be. Whether she ever had a Mr. Fitzgerald is a question nobody asks. I run a clean house, she announces, leading you through hallways where every door has a sturdy lock and the walls are mysteriously thick. My girls are seamstresses and shop assistants who work late hours. The fiction is paper thin, but it's enough to keep the authorities at bay. More importantly, it provides cover for the elaborate support network operating right under Victorian society's upturned nose. Mrs. F shows you the accounts ledger with pride. She charges fair rates: 5 shillings a week for a small room, 7 for one with a fireplace. Compare that to the 10 shillings slumlords charge for rat-infested cellars in Whitechapel, and you understand why her rooms are always full. But the real value isn't in the lodging, it's in the ecosystem of protection, medical care, and financial services she provides. See what men don't understand, she explains, pouring tea from a china pot that's seen better decades, is that we look after our own, always have. She points to a door marked private. Behind it, she's got a safe where girls can store their earnings. Banks won't give accounts to unmarried women without male guarantors. She charges a small fee for the service, but the money's secure from theft, violent clients, or grabby landlords. The mainstream narrative paints landladies as evil harridans exploiting innocent girls. But watching Mrs. F operate is like watching a CEO manage a complex business. When young Kitty stumbles in with a black eye, Mrs. F transforms into part mother, part field medic, part avenging angel. She sends word through her network. The man who hurt Kitty won't find welcome anywhere in Soho. By evening, every house from here to Haymarket knows his description. The medical arrangements are particularly clever. Dr. Sarah Chapman visits twice weekly. Yes, a lady doctor. One of the few who'll treat working women with dignity. She trained at the London School of Medicine for Women and sets up shop in Mrs. F's front parlor, examining girls for a fraction of what the Lock Hospital charges and with considerably more compassion. I'd rather prevent disease than punish it, Dr. Chapman says, distributing pamphlets about hygiene that actually make sense. You discover an entire underground economy of women supporting women. The laundress who collects on Mondays gives discounts for bulk washing. The seamstress who lives on the third floor mends clothes in exchange for meals. The former midwife in the basement helps girls regulate their courses with herbs that definitely aren't for making tea. It's mutual aid wrapped in Victorian propriety, and it works better than any charitable organization. Here's the quirky historical detail. Many of these landladies are former working girls themselves who saved enough to buy property. Mrs. F shows you the deed to her house. She owns it outright, which puts her ahead of 90% of Victorian men. Worked the Strand for 10 years. She admits without shame. Saved every penny I could. Now I make sure my girls have the chances I didn't. The evening routines reveal the house's true nature. Girls prepare for work like soldiers preparing for battle, checking in with Mrs. F, sharing information about problem clients, arranging backup plans. If someone doesn't return by an agreed time, Mrs. F sends her nephew, Big Tom, to investigate. He's 6'4" of Irish muscle, who works as a porter by day and unofficial security by night. The protection racket works both ways. The girls pay a little extra for safety, and Mrs. F makes sure they get it. The financial services extend beyond simple safekeeping. Mrs. F acts as an informal banker, providing loans for emergencies, holding savings for specific goals, even investing money for girls who trust her judgment. She's got shares in railway companies and government bonds, all purchased with the pooled savings of women who officially don't exist in the financial system. The Bank of England don't want our money direct. She laughs. So we find other ways. You meet Mrs. Chen, who runs a similar house near Limehouse, catering to sailors' women. Her establishment includes an informal nursery where working mothers can leave children during evening hours. The respectable world would be scandalized. Pr0stitutes raising children, but these kids are clean, fed, and loved. Mrs. Chen teaches them letters and numbers, preparing them for lives beyond their mother's profession. The network extends across London. Mrs. F maintains relationships with other housekeepers through a system of references and reciprocal arrangements. A girl fleeing trouble in Whitechapel can find shelter in Paddington. Someone who needs to disappear for a while might resurface in Manchester or Liverpool. With connections smoothing the way, it's an underground railroad for women navigating impossible circumstances. Historians still argue whether these arrangements exploited or empowered women. But sitting in Mrs. F's kitchen, watching her orchestrate solutions to a dozen crises, the answer seems clear. When society offers women no protection, they create their own. When banks won't serve them, they become their own bankers. When doctors won't treat them, they find ones who will. The evening meal reveals another service. Mrs. F provides dinner for an extra shilling, and it's proper food, not the bread and dripping poverty diet. Can't work on an empty stomach, she states, ladling out stew that actually contains identifiable meat. The communal dining creates bonds between women who might otherwise be competitors. They share warnings about violent clients, tips about generous ones, gossip about which beat constables can be trusted. The parlor serves as an informal common room where girls read newspapers aloud. Literacy rates are surprisingly high here. Share books and teach each other skills. You watch one woman teaching French phrases to increase earning potential with foreign clients. Another demonstrates accounting techniques learned from a client who worked in banking. Education happens organically, driven by economic necessity, but creating real empowerment. As night falls and the house empties for work, Mrs. F makes her rounds, checking locks, ensuring the night porter is alert, preparing rooms for returning girls. She knows exactly who's out, where they're working, and when they should return. It's maternal and mercenary in equal measure, but it keeps her girls safer than any police protection would. People think we're all about vice and degradation, Mrs. F muses, counting the evening's room rents. But we're about survival. My girls work hard, save their money, and look after each other. Half of them will be running their own houses in 10 years. The other half will find different trades. That's more than most factory girls can say. The clock strikes 10, and you realize you've spent hours in this den of iniquity without seeing anything more scandalous than women supporting each other through impossible circumstances. The real scandal is that they have to create these networks in secret, that their mutual aid gets labeled as criminal conspiracy, that their business acumen goes unrecognized because of how they earn their capital. The morning light filters through grimy windows as you sit in Mrs. Sullivan's kitchen in Bethnal Green, watching her prepare breakfast for 5 children. Her hands move with practiced efficiency, cutting bread, stirring porridge, buttoning shirts, while her youngest clings to her skirts. She's been up since dawn after working until 3, and now she's transforming back into mother mode with the seamless precision of a quick change artist. The mainstream narrative says Pr0stitutes make terrible mothers. But tell that to little Tommy, who's proudly showing you his spelling primer. People think we don't love our children, Mrs. Sullivan says, braiding her daughter's hair. Like spreading our legs for money somehow damages our hearts. She's bitter this morning. The school board visitor came round yesterday, threatening to declare her an unfit mother. The fact that her children are better fed and clothed than most in this neighborhood doesn't matter. What matters is how she affords it. You're about to confront one of Victorian society's most uncomfortable truths. A significant portion of Pr0stitutes are mothers, and many entered the trade specifically to support their children. That widow's weeds you saw on so many working women. Not always a disguise. The death rate for working class men is appalling. Industrial accidents, disease, drink. When a man dies, his widow has exactly three options: the workhouse, where children are separated from mothers, starvation, or the streets. Mrs. Sullivan's friend Agnes arrives with her own brood in tow. She works in a factory by day, streets by night, catching sleep in the gaps like a sailor catching wind. My husband scarpered 2 years ago, she explains, dispensing hair ribbons and wiping noses with equal authority. Left me with 4 mouths to feed and rent due. The parish offered to take the children, place them in good Christian homes over my dead body. The economics are brutal but simple. A widow's pension from the parish, if she qualifies, might be 2 shillings per week. Rent for a single room suitable for a family runs 4 shillings minimum. Food for growing children, coal for warmth, clothes that don't mark them as paupers. The arithmetic doesn't work without supplemental income. And what employment options exist for a woman with children? Factory work requires 12-hour days. Domestic service means living in. Seamstressing pays starvation wages. Do the math. Here's the heartbreaking part. These children often grow up more loved and better cared for than many middle-class offspring, relegated to nurseries and nannies. You watch Mrs. Sullivan help with arithmetic homework. Her patience infinite despite her exhaustion. Agnes teaches her eldest daughter to sew, a practical skill that might spare her the streets. These women pour everything into their children's futures, trying to buy them options with their bodies. The quirky historical detail everyone ignores: many successful Victorians were raised by Pr0stitute mothers. That respectable merchant who funds missionary work in Africa, his mother worked Piccadilly to pay for his education. The lady novelist who writes moral tales, her mother's evening work kept her in the governess school that gave her gentle accomplishments. They just lie about it later, erasing their mother's sacrifices from their carefully constructed histories. You accompany Mrs. Sullivan to the market, where she navigates a complex social geography. The butcher knows her profession, but also knows her money's good, so she gets decent cuts of meat instead of the gristle reserved for the desperate. The grocer's wife sneers, but takes her coins. The teacher at the ragged school pretends not to know how she affords the penny weekly for each child's education. Everyone participates in this elaborate dance of hypocrisy. The children themselves develop survival strategies. 10-year-old Mary Sullivan has learned to say her mother works nights at the telegraph office, a convenient fiction since nobody really understands what telegraph work entails. The younger ones haven't learned to lie yet, which creates moments of awful comedy. My mummy's the prettiest lady on Commercial Street, 6-year-old James announces proudly. His teacher quickly changes the subject. You meet Mrs. Patterson, who's found an unusual solution. She works in what's called a baby farm during the day, one of those horrific establishments where unwanted infants are left to die. But she's secretly saving as many as she can. At night, she earns the money to feed them through street work. I'm damned either way, she says, bottle feeding an abandoned infant. might as well be damned for keeping children alive. The real tragedy unfolds when authorities get involved. The Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, founded with good intentions, often does more harm than good. They remove children from working mothers and place them in industrial schools where the death rate from neglect and abuse makes the streets look safe. You watch a scene that breaks your heart. Social reformers taking well-fed, well-loved children from their sobbing mother because her profession makes her morally unfit. Historians still argue whether Pr0stitute mothers harmed or helped their children, but the evidence is mixed because life is complex. Some children grow up damaged by shame and secrecy. Others thrive on their mother's fierce love and sacrifice. Most fall somewhere between, shaped by poverty more than profession, by societal cruelty more than maternal choices. The afternoon brings a gathering at Mrs. Sullivan's, an informal childcare cooperative where working mothers watch each other's children in shifts. It's a nursery, school, and social club rolled into one. The women teach what they know: basic letters, numbers, sewing, cooking, survival. One mother, clearly educated beyond her current circumstances, gives French lessons. Another teaches accounts. They're preparing their children for better lives with whatever tools they have. The myths about Pr0stitutes children being tainted or hereditary criminals would be laughable if they weren't so cruel. You meet young Anna, aged 14, who helps her mother with legitimate seamstressing work and dreams of being a teacher. Her brother Tom apprentices with a printer, his fees paid by his mother's night work. They're ordinary children with extraordinary mothers, navigating prejudice with resilience learned at the kitchen table. But then there's the dark side, the persistent myth about child Pr0stitution that reformers use to justify their interventions. While it exists, it's far rarer than moralists claim. Most working women are horrified by the idea, and the community polices itself fiercely. When word spreads about a man seeking children, he finds every door closed, every constable suddenly vigilant. The protection network that keeps adult women safe extends double strength to children. The evening brings homework supervision and bedtime rituals. Mrs. Sullivan reads from Pilgrim's Progress, the irony not lost on anyone, while her children settle for sleep. Tomorrow, she'll walk them to school, mend their clothes, help with lessons, make their meals. Tonight she'll walk different streets to afford that tomorrow. The cycle continues, powered by love and necessity in equal measure. We're not angels or demons, Mrs. Sullivan says quietly, watching her children sleep. We're just mothers doing what we have to do. History won't remember us kindly, but our children will remember full bellies and warm beds and mothers who fought for them with everything we had. The clock strikes 9, time for transformation again. Mrs. Sullivan pins up her hair, applies her evening face, becomes someone else, but the mother remains, carried in the locket with 5 small photographs, in the careful budget that allocates every penny toward their futures, in the fierce determination that her children will have choices she never did. The fog's thick as thieves' honor tonight, as you watch Detective Inspector Morrison of H Division lean against a lamppost in Whitechapel, pocketing something that glints like gold from a woman in green taffeta. Evening. Violet. He tips his helmet. Usual arrangement? She nods. And just like that, the law and the lawless reach another understanding. Welcome to the corruption games of 1885, where the real criminals might be wearing badges. You've been following Morrison's beat all week, and the pattern's clear as gin. He knows every working girl by name, their corners, their specialties, their rates, not because he's building cases. Lord, no. He's running a protection racket that would make the Sicilians jealous. 5 shillings a week buys you immunity from arrest. 10 shillings gets you warning before raids. A sovereign might even get competing girls moved along from your territory. The official Metropolitan Police reports claim Pr0stitution is being vigorously suppressed. And the reality? You're watching uniformed officers operate as middle management in the very trade they're supposed to eliminate. Constable Barnes collects his weekly envelope from Mrs. Chen's house with the punctuality of a rent collector. Sergeant Williams times his patrol to avoid the rush hour outside the Argyle rooms. It's organized crime where the criminals wear blue. Here's the game everyone plays. Arrests must be made to keep the statistics looking respectable. So Morrison arrests the same women in careful rotation, always those who can't pay, new girls who don't know the system, or established workers who've missed their payments. They spend a night in the cells, pay a fine to the magistrate, who's possibly getting his own cut, and return to work. It's theater, and everyone knows their lines. The magistrates' courts are their own special comedy. You sit through a morning session where Mr. Justice Pemberton presides with magnificent whiskers and magnificent hypocrisy. He lectures fallen women about virtue, while everyone knows his mistress keeps rooms in St. John's Wood. 6 months' hard labor. He intones to a woman who couldn't pay her protection money. 3 shillings fine. To one who could. Justice is blindfolded for a reason. She'd be embarrassed to watch. The reformers making everything worse. Naturally, the Society for the Suppression of Vice sends undercover investigators to entrap women, then celebrates successful prosecutions. You follow one of these moral crusaders, Mr. Chadwick, as he prowls the Haymarket in his obvious disguise. No working man wears boots that clean. He approaches woman after woman, trying to get them to proposition him explicitly so he can make a citizen's arrest. Most are too smart, recognizing the trap, but hunger makes people desperate, and eventually he snares someone. What makes your blood boil is watching Chadwick testify in court the next morning, piously describing how this shameless Jezebel corrupted his Christian virtue by offering sinful services. The woman, Margaret O'Brien, widowed mother of 2, stands in the dock knowing that speaking the truth would only make things worse. Chadwick gets a commendation. Margaret gets 3 months picking oakum in Holloway. The quirky historical detail nobody mentions. Some of the most effective madams in London are police widows. They know the system inside out, have connections throughout the force, and nobody wants to arrest Inspector Jenkins' grieving widow, do they? Mrs. Jenkins herself runs a very discreet establishment near Victoria that caters to senior officers and civil servants. Her late husband's colleagues ensure she never faces difficulties with licensing or raids. The cat and mouse games reach absurd heights during purity campaigns. And word spreads faster than typhoid when reformers pressure the Home Office for visible action. Suddenly, every woman on the streets develops urgent business elsewhere. You watch mass migrations from Haymarket to Hampstead, from Piccadilly to Pimlico, as the working girls scatter like startled starlings. The police dutifully raid empty streets, arrest a few sacrificial lambs, and declare victory. A week later, everyone's back. Constable Timothy O'Malley breaks the code one night after too many pints. "Look," he slurs, "we could arrest every tart from here to Tower Bridge. And what then? They'd be back tomorrow, only angrier. Least this way, we know who's who, where they work, and nobody gets hurt." Well, nobody gets hurt worse than usual. He's not wrong. But the cynicism burns like cheap gin. The real innovation comes from the women themselves. They develop early warning networks that would impress military strategists. Boys are paid pennies to watch for approaching raids. Certain flower sellers actually sell flowers, but also information. A red rose means danger. White means all clear. The coffee stalls operate as intelligence centers where information flows faster than hot coffee. By the time police arrive for a raid, they find only empty rooms and innocent seamstresses. You witness the bizarre spectacle of a social purity meeting where reformers debate solutions to the Pr0stitution problem. Reverend Dalrymple suggests prayer and cold baths. Mrs. Pemberton advocates teaching fallen women lace making because apparently the solution to poverty is more poorly paid piecework. Nobody suggests paying women living wages or providing actual alternatives. Meanwhile, Detective Morrison stands at the back, mentally calculating how much the subsequent crackdown will increase his protection fees. The enforcement patterns reveal clear class bias. In Mayfair, discreet brothels operate behind brass nameplates reading massage parlor or private nursing. Though these never face raids, but in Whitechapel, a woman standing still too long risks arrest for loitering with intent. The law has remarkable vision problems, nearsighted in wealthy districts, eagle-eyed in poor ones. Historians still argue whether police corruption helped or hindered Pr0stitutes. But you're watching the reality. The protection money is a tax on poverty, but it also provides predictability in an unpredictable world. Women who pay know they won't be arrested this week. Those who can't pay know to work different areas. It's exploitative and stabilizing simultaneously. Like many Victorian institutions, the midnight hour brings the changing of the guard. Literally, the night shift constables have different arrangements than the day shift, leading to confusion and occasional conflict. You watch two constables nearly come to blows over who has jurisdiction over a particular corner, while the women working there roll their eyes at the masculine posturing over their economic territory. Then there's the special irony of the rescue homes. Police deliver fallen women to these institutions as an alternative to jail, collecting a fee for each delivery. The homes are essentially prisons with prayers, where women manufacture goods for pitiful wages while being lectured about virtue. Many escape back to the streets within weeks, only to be rearrested and re-delivered, generating more fees. It's recycling, Victorian style, by 3 in the morning. The games wind down. Morrison counts his night's takings, probably more than his official salary. The women count theirs, minus protection fees, fines, and bribes. Everyone pretends the system works, while knowing it's rotten as Thames mud. But like many Victorian institutions, it persists because the alternatives, honest law enforcement, economic reform, women's rights, are too radical to contemplate. It's all a dance, says Violet, the woman in green taffeta you met at the beginning. They pretend to chase us. We pretend to run. They pretend to uphold the law. We pretend to break it. Everyone goes home paid. She's right. But the dance floor is tilted. And guess who's always struggling uphill? The orchestra strikes up another waltz at the Alhambra Theater as you settle into the velvet seats of the promenade, that notorious mixing ground where theatrical entertainment meets commercial romance. The gaslights dim for the next act. But nobody's really watching the stage. The real performance happens in the aisles, where elaborately dressed women parade with the studied casualness of peacocks, while gentlemen pretend they're only here for the culture. This is where Victorian entertainment and Pr0stitution merge into something entirely more complex than either. You recognize several faces from the Haymarket working the promenade tonight. But here they're transformed. That's definitely Lucy Morrison, who usually works near Charing Cross. But tonight, she's Miss Lucinda Gray, mysterious beauty with a tragic past and a convenient appreciation for champagne. The theater legitimizes the transaction. He's not paying for sex. Heaven forbids. He's simply treating a lady to refreshments and perhaps a small gift to help with her theatrical ambitions. The manager, Mr. Fontaine, née Frank Smith from Birmingham, explains the economics while watching his domain from the gallery. We take 40% of bar sales, and the promenade license brings in another £200 per year from the magistrates. The ladies pay nothing directly, but they purchase refreshments at inflated prices and attract gentlemen who do the same. Everyone profits. He's created a perfect ecosystem where vice funds virtue, or at least variety acts. But this is just the visible tip of a massive entertainment industry iceberg. The music halls, supper clubs, dancing rooms, and night cafes of London form an alternative economy where women can work without explicitly selling sex while definitely trading on sexuality. It's the difference between Pr0stitution and Pr0stitution adjacent. And that difference matters enormously for legal protection and social mobility. Take Jenny Starlight, definitely not her real name, who you meet between acts. She started as a pure street worker, but saved enough to take singing lessons. Now she performs comic songs at 3 different halls, earns £1 per night, and only takes select admirers for private performances. She's crossed the blurry line from Pr0stitute to entertainer, though the distinction often depends on who's asking and why. The mainstream history loves to paint music halls as dens of corruption, but you're watching something more like vocational training in action. That chorus girl learning to dance, she's developing skills that might take her from the streets to the stage permanently. The barmaid mastering witty banter, She's building a clientele who come as much for her conversation as her other charms. These venues are schools for reinvention. Here's the quirky bit historians miss. Many legitimate stars started in these twilight establishments. That famous actress currently playing Juliet at the Lyceum. 5 years ago, she was working the promenade at the Oxford Music Hall. The difference between a courtesan and a celebrity is often just timing, luck, and a good press agent who can bury inconvenient history. The Empire Theater's famous promenade operates like a stock exchange for desire. Women circulate with careful timing, making eye contact, allowing approach, negotiating without seeming to negotiate. The bar staff, all women, facilitate introductions with practiced discretion. Sir might enjoy meeting Miss Violet. She's very fond of Byron. The barmaid suggests, which translates to Violet charges £2 and has a room nearby. It's commerce dressed as culture. You follow the ecosystem to Romano's restaurant, where the after-theater crowd mingles until dawn. The proprietor maintains careful standards. Women must be well-dressed, well-behaved, and well-connected. No obvious streetwalkers allowed, but former streetwalkers who've learned to perform respectability. Welcome, madam. The food is overpriced. The champagne flows like the Thames, and everyone pretends they're just having a very late dinner. The dancing academies tell another story. Professor DuPont's academy teaches the can-can and other continental dances to working-class girls who pay in installments, but the real curriculum includes deportment, conversation, and how to attract male attention profitably. Half his students end up in music halls, the other half in kept situations. He's running a finishing school for the demi-monde, turning factory girls into fantasy creatures. The photographers' studios clustered around the theaters create another revenue stream. Artistic photographs of actresses and dancers sell briskly, occupying that gray area between portraiture and pornography. The women earn modeling fees, royalties if they're savvy, and increased recognition that translates to better bookings. You meet one photographer who specializes in theatrical portraits that definitely won't be hanging in family parlors. His clients include everyone from genuine actresses to ambitious Pr0stitutes crafting new identities. Even the street entertainment connects to this world. Organ grinders women who dance for coins often graduate to music hall stages. Street singers build followings that translate to indoor venues. That flower seller with the beautiful voice might be discovered by a talent scout, or more likely, by a wealthy admirer who funds her transformation. The entertainment industry provides ladders between different levels of sex work, even if the rungs are slippery. Historians still argue whether music halls corrupted innocent girls or provided alternatives to street Pr0stitution. Watching the 2 a.m. show at the Trocadero, where tired women perform enthusiastic high kicks for drunk men throwing coins. The answer seems to be both. Yes, these venues exploit women's sexuality for profit, but they also offer performance skills, regular wages, and the possibility of fame, or at least infamy. The police treat entertainment venues differently than street Pr0stitution, partly because wealthy men have investments here. Raiding the Haymarket is one thing, Closing the Empire Theater would upset influential shareholders, so these spaces exist in legal limbo. Everyone knows what happens in the private boxes and dark corners. But as long as it's dressed in theatrical costume, authority looks away. You meet Madame Petrova, who runs a ballet academy that's really a training ground for high-class courtesans. Her students learn dance, certainly, but also languages, literature, and how to hold conversation with powerful men. I create artists, she insists, watching her girls practice. If they also learn to support themselves through male admiration, well, that's been the way of artists since ancient Greece. The variety shows themselves blur every boundary. That oriental dance performed by Princess Shamara, née Ethel from Bermondsey. Its artistic expression and erotic display simultaneously. The comic singer making jokes about married life while showing significant ankle. She's entertaining and advertising. The tableau vivant featuring classical nude poses, high art for the educated, stimulation for everyone else. As dawn approaches and the last acts finish, you see the careful choreography of departure. Women leave at intervals, some with admirers, some alone to rooms paid for by the night's earnings. The theater's empty, but the economy continues in the all-night cafes, the private clubs, the boarding houses that ask no questions. Entertainment and Pr0stitution dance together through London's nights, partners in a waltz that society condemns but can't stop watching. The real revelation is how many women use entertainment as either alternative or supplement to straight Pr0stitution. It offers flexibility, artistry, and the radical possibility that selling your voice or dancing skills might eventually free you from selling anything else. In a world with few options, the stage provides one more, compromised, complicated, but undeniably real. You're nursing a djinn in the back room of the Crown and Anchor when you witness something that shatters every Victorian assumption about Pr0stitutes and romance. Tommy Sullivan, dock worker with hands like ham hocks and a heart soft as butter, is proposing marriage to Violet Winters, who's worked the Haymarket for 3 years. He knows exactly what she does for a living. They met when she was working, and he doesn't care. I love you, Vi, he says simply. The past is past. Let's make a future. This isn't supposed to happen. The mainstream narrative insists Pr0stitutes are incapable of real love, that they're emotionally damaged goods who spread their corruption to anyone foolish enough to care for them. But here's Violet, tears streaming down her painted cheeks, saying yes to a man who sees her as more than her profession. Around the pub, other working girls dab their eyes and raise glasses to the happy couple. They've all dreamed this dream. The truth. Victorian society desperately wants to hide. These marriages happen all the time, not just marriages, but genuine love affairs, lasting partnerships, and relationships that defy every moral prohibition. You meet Sarah and James, married 5 years now. She still works occasionally when money's tight, and he accepts it as pragmatically as he'd accept her taking in washing. Better than starving. He shrugs, and she comes home to me. Here's what really scandalizes respectable society. Many clients fall genuinely in love with the women they pay, not just lust or obsession, but the kind of steady affection that builds from repeated conversation, shared laughter, mutual understanding. Mr. Pemberton, the banker, has visited the same woman every Tuesday for 10 years. Somewhere along the way, transaction became relationship. He pays her rent now, not as a client, but as a man supporting the woman he loves, but cannot marry without losing everything. You document case after case that shouldn't exist according to Victorian morality. Ellen Murphy, who married her best client's son, the young man fell for her despite his father's horror. Mary Chen, whose sailor husband knows about her past and defends her honor with his fists when necessary. Agnes Williams, who lives with a clerk in a common law marriage that's more stable than most legal unions. Love, it turns out, is remarkably resistant to moral categories. The working girls themselves approach romance with fascinating complexity. Yes, they're pragmatic about sex and money, but that doesn't destroy their capacity for genuine feeling. If anything, it clarifies it. When you've had hundreds of men grunt and go, explains Caroline, a veteran of 10 years. You know the difference when one actually sees you, really sees you, not just the fantasy. That's when it gets dangerous. And the quirky historical detail everyone ignores? Some of the great Victorian love stories started in brothels. That respectable merchant's devoted wife who nurses him through illness and raises his children. They met when she was working a music hall promenade. The difference between a scandalous liaison and a touching romance often comes down to whether the woman successfully transitions to respectability. You attend the wedding of Annie Thompson and Robert Clark at a small church in Bermondsey. The vicar knows Annie's history. Everyone does, but he performs the ceremony with genuine warmth. Marriage redeems all sins, he says, which is theologically dubious, but emotionally satisfying. Annie wears white because Robert insisted. And if anyone finds irony in that, they keep it to themselves. But it's not all wedding bells and redemption. The relationships between Pr0stitutes and their lovers face unique challenges. There's the jealousy issue. How do you handle your wife returning to work when money's short? The social ostracism, neighbors who whisper, employers who fire men for their wives' pasts, the legal vulnerabilities. A vindictive relative can have such marriages investigated, children declared illegitimate. Some men become pimps by degrees, starting as lovers and sliding into exploitation, but others become fierce protectors, using their masculine privilege to shield women from the worst brutalities of the trade. You meet Big Jim Morrison, who fell for a working girl and now runs an interference for her and her friends. Dealing with violent clients and corrupt cops, it's protection born of love, not profit. The emotional negotiations in these relationships fascinate. How do you maintain intimacy when sex is work? How do you express affection in ways that feel genuine rather than professional? The couples who succeed develop their own languages, private jokes, specific touches that mean this is real, not performance, rituals that separate love from labor. Then there are the women who find love with each other. Victorian society can barely conceive of Pr0stitutes having feelings, let alone lesbian ones, which makes these relationships paradoxically safer. Mary and Elizabeth share rooms, share earnings, share a bed, and then everyone assumes it's just economical. They've been together 8 years, more married than most married couples, invisible in their visibility. Historians still argue whether Pr0stitutes could experience authentic love after commercializing sexuality, which is frankly insulting. Watching Violet plan her wedding with the giddy excitement of any bride, seeing the tenderness between established couples, witnessing the everyday domesticity of these impossible relationships, you realize love persists despite everything society does to kill it. The children from these unions face particular challenges, legally legitimate if their parents marry, socially tainted by their mother's pasts, but many thrive, protected by their parents' fierce determination to give them better lives. You meet young Thomas Clark, age 7, who knows his mother used to work nights, but also knows she reads him stories and makes the best apple tart in London. Children adapt to truths adults find unbearable. Some relationships transcend categorization entirely. There's Lord M, who's maintained the same mistress for 20 years. She was a Pr0stitute, then is kept woman, now something like a common law wife. He cannot marry her without social ruin, but their bond is stronger than most society marriages. They have 3 children he's acknowledged, educated, and provided for. Is it scandal or romance? Both. Neither. The Saturday night dances at various halls become courtship grounds where working girls and their admirers meet on almost equal terms. Dancing legitimizes public affection, allows couples to be seen together, creates space for romance within the commercial framework. You watch established couples waltz with the comfortable familiarity of long partnership, while new romances navigate the delicate balance between transaction and affection. As closing time approaches at the Crown and Anchor, Tommy and Violet are still celebrating with friends. She's quit working as of tonight. They'll manage on his wages somehow, or maybe she won't quit entirely, returning when desperate, or maybe she'll find other work now that she has the protection of marriage. The future is uncertain, but tonight they're in love, and that's enough. Love is love, says old Martha, who's seen every permutation of romance in her 40 years around the trade. Doesn't matter where it starts or how it grows, the heart wants what it wants, and thank God for that. Imagine how gray the world would be if only the respectable were allowed to love. Osos. The laundry smell hits you first. Carbolic soap mixed with despair and just a hint of brimstone from the sermons. You're inside the Magdalene Laundry in Highgate, one of dozens of rescue homes where fallen women are supposedly saved through the redemptive power of washing other people's dirty linen. Sister Agatha, face like a pickled walnut, explains the system while women in identical gray dresses move like ghosts between steaming tubs. We save them from lives of sin, she intones, watching a woman scrub until her hands bleed. Through work and prayer, they find redemption. The irony is so thick you could starch it. These women who supposedly need saving from exploitation are working 14-hour days for no wages, just room and board, which means a straw mattress and gruel that makes workhouse food look appetizing. The laundries take in commercial washing at commercial rates, but the workers see none of it. It's slavery dressed up as salvation, and everyone pretends it's for their own good. You meet Elizabeth, who's been here 18 months. She entered voluntarily. The streets were getting dangerous, and winter was coming. Thought it would be temporary, she whispers during the 10-minute lunch break, but they won't let me leave until I'm fully reformed. Been fully reformed for a year now, but funny how there's always more laundry needs doing. The doors aren't technically locked, but try leaving without references, without money, without even your own clothes. They burn those on entry. Too worldly, apparently. The daily routine is designed to break spirits, not save souls. Wake at 4:30 a.m. for prayers. Work from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. with 2 short breaks for meals that barely qualify as food. Evening prayers until 9 p.m. Bed at 9:30. No talking during work. No singing except hymns. No letters in or out without inspection. No visitors except approved clergy. It's prison with extra psalms. Here's what really happens in these supposed refuges. Women who entered voluntarily find themselves trapped in indefinite servitude. The reformers who run these institutions claim they're protecting women from the corruption of the streets. But you're watching women with consumption coughing blood onto sheets they'll wash tomorrow. Women with untreated syphilis going mad from mercury treatments. Women who were relatively healthy on the streets dying from exhaustion and malnutrition. The quirky historical detail nobody mentions. Many successful madams recruit directly from these rescue homes. They send in girls posing as penitents who spread word about the outside world, leave notes about employment opportunities, sometimes even help organize escapes. It's an underground railroad running in reverse, liberating women from their liberators. The reformers never understand why their saved women keep relapsing into sin. Maybe because sin pays better than slavery. Sister Agatha shows you the punishment cells. Sorry. Meditation rooms, where difficult women spend days in solitary confinement on bread and water. The crime might be laughing, or speaking without permission, or refusing to admit their inherent wickedness during public confession. One woman spent a week in meditation for humming a music hall tune while washing. Can't have that kind of moral contamination spreading. The economics are staggering. This single laundry processes thousands of pounds worth of washing annually using free labor. The church claims all profits go to maintaining the institution. But you notice the Mother Superior's office has silk curtains and a Turkish carpet. Meanwhile, the women sleep 30 to a dormitory designed for 15, sharing beds and shifts because there aren't enough to go around. You attend a board meeting where wealthy benefactors discuss the Magdalene problem. Mrs. Worthington suggests they need stricter discipline. Apparently, 14 hours of washing isn't enough. Reverend Pritchard wants longer prayer sessions. Lady Pemberton thinks the food is too generous and encouraging idleness. Not one person suggests asking the women what might actually help them. Not one person questions whether this system saves anyone from anything except wages. The medical care is criminally negligent. You watch the visiting doctor, who comes once a month if they're lucky, diagnose everything from tuberculosis to pregnancy as moral weakness requiring harder work. Women with serious conditions get prayer and patent medicines that are mostly alcohol. The death rate is carefully not recorded. But the cemetery out back tells its own story. The teaching programs are a cruel joke. They claim to prepare women for respectable employment, but all they teach is washing, ironing, and scripture. After 2 years in a Magdalene laundry, a woman is qualified for exactly one job: washerwoman, the lowest paid women's work in London. It's almost like they're designed to fail, to send women back to the streets with no options except the ones they had before, minus 2 years of their lives. But here's what breaks your heart. Some women internalize the shame so deeply they refuse to leave even when they can. They've been told they're worthless so often they believe it. Mary O'Brien has been here 5 years, could walk out tomorrow, but stays because where would the likes of me go? The psychological destruction is more thorough than any physical wall. Historians still argue whether these institutions helped or harmed, but standing in this industrial scale misery factory, the answer seems obvious. The few success stories, women who leave to become domestic servants or marry religious men who fetishize their redemption, are held up as proof the system works. The hundreds who die, go mad, or return to sex work in worse condition than they left are conveniently forgotten. The resistance is beautiful, though women develop sign languages to communicate during enforced silence. They share food with those too sick to work. They create protection networks more solid than anything on the streets. You watch them smuggle letters out in laundry deliveries, hide money in hymns, plan escapes with military precision. The solidarity born in this hell is stronger than any sermon about sin. The night shift is the worst. Women who worked all day washing do mending by candlelight until midnight, eyes straining, fingers bleeding from needle pricks. The reformers call it meditation time. The women call it other things, but not where Sister Agatha can hear. You help fold sheets until your forearms ache, and that's just an hour. They do this every night, unpaid, unloved, unseen by the respectable world that wears the clothes they wash. As you prepare to leave, because you can leave, that's the difference. Elizabeth slips you a note. Tell them. It says simply, tell them what? That Christian charity can be crueler than commercial exploitation. That rescue can be another form of rape. That women who sell their bodies on their own terms have more dignity than women whose bodies are stolen in the name of salvation. The gate closes behind you with a sound like judgment. Behind those walls, women who wanted help found only different chains. The reformers sleep well, confident in their virtue. The women don't sleep. There's too much washing to do, too many souls to save through suds and suffering. It's enough to make you think the unreformed Pr0stitutes have the right idea. At least their exploitation is honest about what it is. The brass nameplate reads, Mrs. Victoria Ashworth, Property Management. But everyone in Paddington knows the real story. 10 years ago, she was Vicky Smith, working the Strand in a tattered yellow dress. Now she owns 6 buildings, employs 12 people, and has tea with her banker every Tuesday. You're sitting in her mahogany paneled office as she reviews contracts with the sharp eye of someone who learned arithmetic counting coins in the dark. Men always assume we're stupid with money, she says, signing papers that transfer another property to her portfolio. They think because we earn it on our backs, we'll spend it on our backs. But when you've made every penny through sweat and shame, you learn its value quick enough. Her secretary, another former working girl, brings tea in china cups that cost more than most people's monthly rent. This is the story the Victorian society desperately wants to suppress. Pr0stitutes who become successful businesswomen, property magnates, entrepreneurs. The mainstream narrative needs fallen women to stay fallen, but some refuse to follow the script. They save, invest, and build empires from earnings that supposedly doom them to destruction. You follow Mrs. Ashworth to inspect her newest acquisition, a boarding house in Bayswater. She knows every pipe, every floorboard, every potential problem, learned buildings from the inside out. She explains, checking window frames for rot. When you've worked in enough rented rooms, you know what makes a good one. She's already calculating renovations, better locks, thicker walls, separate entrances, safety features that only someone who's needed them would think to install. The financial literacy among successful Pr0stitutes puts most Victorian gentlemen to shame. At the Salvation Bank, one of the few that accepts deposits from unmarried women without questions, you meet a dozen women managing sophisticated portfolios. They're investing in railway shares, government bonds, even international trade. One shows you her ledger, detailed accounts going back 7 years, every penny tracked, every investment analyzed. Here's the quirky historical fact. Some of the most successful women combine sex work with other businesses, creating integrated enterprises. Take Madame Laurent's millinery shop. Officially, she sells hats. Unofficially, her private fitting rooms host very particular consultations. The hat business is real and profitable, providing cover for the more lucrative services. She employs 6 legitimate milliners alongside her other workers, creating jobs for women transitioning out of street work. The property ladder is particularly popular. London's booming, and women who understand the importance of safe spaces invest in boarding houses, small hotels, even commercial buildings. They rent to other working women at fair rates, creating networks of financial interdependence. Mrs. Chang owns an entire street in Limehouse, bought building by building over 15 years. Every brick is a night I won't forget, she says. But now those bricks keep me warm. You discover an informal investment club that meets monthly in the back room of a respectable tea room. 12 women, all current or former Pr0stitutes, pool resources for larger investments. They've backed a shipping venture that returned 300%, funded a small factory that employs 50 women at fair wages, even invested in a patent for improved washing machines. Their combined capital rivals many male investment societies, but they keep it quiet. Success is safer in shadows. The transition strategies fascinate. Some women gradually shift from sex work to related businesses. massage parlors that are actually massage parlors, dance instruction that's really dance instruction. Others make clean breaks, using saved capital to enter entirely different fields. You meet a former courtesan who now runs a successful typing school, teaching skills that didn't exist when she started saving for her future. But it's not just individual success stories. These women create economic ecosystems that support others. Mrs. Ashworth employs former working girls as property managers, giving them respectable employment and training. Madame Laurent teaches millinery skills to women wanting to leave the streets. The investment club funds small loans to women starting businesses. It's trickle-down economics that actually trickles. The legal obstacles are infuriating. Married women can't own property without their husband's permission. So most successful Pr0stitutes stay unmarried or lie about their status. Banks refuse loans to women without male guarantors. Commercial licenses require good character references that no honest referee would provide, yet they persist. Finding lawyers who bend rules, bankers who see profit over propriety, officials who can be persuaded to overlook backgrounds. Historians still argue whether these success stories were exceptional or representative. The failures, women who saved for years only to be robbed, who invested in schemes that collapsed, who built businesses destroyed by moral crusaders, rarely leave records. But standing in Mrs. Ashworth's office, surrounded by the tangible evidence of a decade's careful planning, the potential is obvious. Given half a chance, these women build empires. The diversification strategies show remarkable sophistication. One woman owns a laundry, a lodging house, and shares in 3 shops, spreading risk across different sectors. Another invests exclusively in transportation, betting on London's growth. They read financial papers, attend public lectures on economics, sitting in the back, bonnets pulled low, study markets with the intensity of exchange floor traders. You attend a property auction where Mrs. Ashworth outbids 3 respectable gentlemen for a commercial building. They sputter about propriety, but her money's good and her lawyer's better. Gentlemen assume we'll spend everything on pretty dresses and gin. She tells you afterward, let them, while they're underestimating us. We're buying the ground beneath their feet. The charitable work these women do goes largely unrecognized. That hospital ward for women's diseases, funded by anonymous donations from successful courtesans. The school for working-class girls that teaches actual skills instead of just scripture. Backed by a former madam who remembers being told education would corrupt her. They can't attach their names, that would taint the charity, but they give generously to causes that might spare other women their choices. The networking is extraordinary. These women maintain connections across class lines, geographic boundaries, even international borders. A woman who saved enough here might invest in opportunities abroad, where her past matters less than her pounds sterling. They share information about trustworthy lawyers, honest bankers, profitable ventures. It's a commercial intelligence network operated by women officially too stupid to understand business. As evening falls, Mrs. Ashworth returns to her home, a respectable townhouse in a respectable neighborhood where nobody asks about her past because her money ensures they don't need to. She has a cook, 2 maids, and a companion who helps manage her affairs, from desperate girl on the Strand to property magnate in a decade. It shouldn't be possible, but here she stands, proof that determination and capital can rewrite any story. We're not victims or villains, she says, watching the sun set over her personal empire. We're businesswomen who started with the only capital we had, ourselves, and we've parlayed that into something nobody can take away. Let them write their moral tales. We're writing checks. Oh. The examination room at the Royal Free Hospital reeks of carbolic and fear as you watch Dr. Elizabeth Garrett Anderson prepare her instruments, clean ones, notably, which already sets her apart from the police surgeons. She's one of the few doctors who opposed the Contagious Diseases Acts from the beginning, and now she's treating women brutalized by the system meant to protect public health. The acts, she says tersely, are medical rape sanctioned by law. You've been following the implementation of these acts since 1864, and the reality is worse than any Gothic horror. Any woman walking alone near a port or garrison town can be arrested on suspicion of being a Pr0stitute. No evidence needed, just a policeman's assumption. Once arrested, she's forced to submit to internal examination or face immediate imprisonment. The examinations are performed with speculum that haven't been cleaned between patients, spreading the very diseases they claim to prevent. Margaret Kelly sits on the examination table, shaking. She's a factory worker who was walking home after a late shift when arrested. The police surgeon declared her diseased after a 2-minute examination, sentenced her to 3 months in a lock hospital. Now she's here because the brutal treatment gave her an infection the original examination claimed to find. He didn't even wash his hands, she whispers. Just forced that thing inside me, said I was lying about being respectable. The medical brutality is staggering. Police surgeons, often barely qualified doctors who couldn't build respectable practices, perform dozens of examinations daily. Assembly line style, women are strapped down if they resist. The speculums are huge, designed for difficult births, not routine examinations. Women scream, they bleed, they develop injuries that become infected. Then they're blamed for the infections as proof of their diseased nature. Doctors. Anderson shows you the official statistics, then her own records. They claim the acts reduced venereal disease by 40%. What they don't mention is they stopped testing soldiers entirely and only count women who complete treatment as cured. Meanwhile, I'm treating women for injuries caused by examination, infections spread by dirty instruments, and psychological trauma that may never heal. The resistance movement started small. Josephine Butler, a respectable middle-class woman, shocked society by defending Pr0stitutes' rights to bodily autonomy. She argued radical thought that women shouldn't be subject to forced medical examination without trial or conviction. The fact that this was controversial tells you everything about Victorian attitudes toward women's bodies. You attend a meeting of the Ladies' National Association for the repeal of the Contagious Diseases Acts. The room is packed with an unlikely alliance: middle-class reformers, working Pr0stitutes, religious women, and early feminists. They're united by outrage at state-sanctioned sexual assault. If they can do this to Pr0stitutes, Butler argues, they can do it to any woman, your daughter, your sister, you. The pushback is vicious. Newspapers call Butler worse than the Pr0stitutes she defends. Ministers preach against her. She receives death threats, excrement through her letterbox, has meetings violently disrupted, but she persists. And slowly, others join. The movement grows from dozens to thousands, holding rallies, publishing pamphlets, lobbying Parliament with facts that make comfortable men squirm. Here's the quirky historical detail. Some of the most effective resistance came from the women subjected to the acts. They organized boycotts of registered examinations, helped women escape before arrest, created underground networks to warn about police raids. In Plymouth, Pr0stitutes went on strike, refusing all naval clients until the acts were suspended. The economic impact was immediate. Funny how quickly moral concerns evaporate when commerce is affected. The legal challenges reveal the act's true purpose. Women have no right to refuse examination, no right to legal representation, no appeal process. But here's the kicker: men are never examined. Soldiers and sailors who spread disease face no consequences. The acts explicitly target only women, based on the assumption that male sexuality is uncontrollable while female sexuality is criminal. You document case after case of mistaken arrests, shopgirls, servants, factory workers, even respectable married women, all subjected to forced examination because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Once examined, they're marked forever. Employers fire them, families disown them. The examination itself becomes proof of guilt in society's eyes. The medical establishment splits. Progressive doctors like Anderson argue the acts are medically useless and morally abhorrent. Conservative doctors defend them as necessary for public health. The debate gets ugly. Anderson is accused of being unsexed, hysterical, probably diseased herself, because obviously any woman who defends Pr0stitutes must be one, right? Historians still argue whether the acts were well-intentioned public health measures or deliberate social control, but watching women dragged screaming into examination rooms, seeing the pleasure some police surgeons take in their power, the answer seems obvious. This isn't medicine, it's domination, dressed in medical authority. The Underground Railroad, helping women escape the act's reach, is impressive. Safe houses in non-regulated towns, fake employment papers, networks of sympathizers who hide women during police sweeps. It's organized resistance to organized oppression, operated mainly by the women most at risk. The parliamentary hearings are a farce. Committees of men debate women's bodies without consulting women. They hear evidence from police and doctors who profit from the system, dismiss testimony from women who've suffered under it. When Butler speaks, a rare allowance, they barely pretend to listen, but her words are recorded, preserved, proof that someone stood up and said, "This is wrong." By 1883, the resistance has grown too large to ignore. The acts are suspended, though not fully repealed until 1886. It's a victory, but a bitter one. Thousands of women were traumatized, infected, imprisoned. The precedent was set. The state could invade women's bodies in the name of public health. The examination rooms close, but the attitudes that created them persist. Dr. Anderson tends another victim, a young woman whose internal injuries from forced examination have left her unable to work. They called it protection. The woman says bitterly. Protection from what? The only thing that hurt me was their protection. And Anderson can heal some physical wounds, but the violation goes deeper than medicine can reach. As you leave the hospital, you pass a group of women celebrating the act's suspension. They're singing, crying, holding each other for the first time in 20 years. They can walk the streets without fear of state-sanctioned assault. It's a small freedom, but freedoms are won in inches, not miles. We showed them, says an elderly Pr0stitute who fought from the beginning. Showed them we're not just bodies to be inspected and controlled. We're people, and people fight back. She's right. The Contagious Diseases Acts were meant to control women, but instead they created a movement. From forced examination came feminist rebellion. Sometimes oppression breeds its own destruction. The autumn fog of 1888 carries a new kind of terror through Whitechapel's streets. You're standing at the corner of Dorset Street, the worst street in London. They call it, watching women who usually work until dawn hurry inside before midnight. Jack's hunting, and everything has changed. Not just the 5 women he's butchered, but the entire ecosystem of survival you've been documenting. The Ripper murders aren't just killing individuals, they're destroying a community. Mary Kelly was the last. Found this morning in Miller's Court. You knew her, not well, but enough to nod hello. 25 years old, Irish accent, sang sentimental songs when drunk. Now she's meat spread across a room, and the women who shared her world are trying to process both grief and terror. Could have been any of us, whispers Martha Tabram's friend. Will be, if we keep working, but if we don't work, we starve. So what do? The mainstream narrative focuses on Jack. Endless speculation about his identity, his methods, his madness, but you're watching the real story unfold among the living, how a community under siege adapts, protects itself, processes trauma that the comfortable world can't imagine. These aren't just unfortunates getting their comeuppance, as some newspapers sickeningly suggest. They're human beings trying to survive both poverty and a predator. The police response reveals every prejudice you've documented. Hundreds of extra constables flood Whitechapel, but they're not protecting women, they're arresting them. The logic, such as it is, runs thus. Remove Pr0stitutes from the streets, and Jack has no victims. Never mind that this removes their income, too. Inspector Aberline seems genuinely concerned, but he's swimming against a tide of official indifference to that class of woman. Then you attend the funeral of Catherine Eddowes, and the turnout surprises those who think Pr0stitutes have no friends. The church is packed with working women who've pooled pennies for flowers. They sing hymns with voices trained in music halls, cry genuine tears for a woman the papers dismiss as no better than she should be. The minister, to his credit, speaks of her as a child of God, deserving dignity in death. Not everyone agrees. You hear muttering about defiling sacred ground. The buddy system emerges organically. Women who once worked alone now move in pairs or groups. They've developed signals, whistles, coded shouts, specific routes that keep them in sight of each other. It's not perfect protection, but it's something. The younger women are paired with veterans who know every alley, every potential escape route, every doorway that might offer shelter. Here's what the history books miss. The murders spark unprecedented political organization among Pr0stitutes. They hold meetings, actual organized meetings, to discuss safety strategies. They petition for better police protection, only to be told they shouldn't be on the streets anyway. They create their own patrols. Older women past their working prime who walk circuits watching for trouble. It's community policing by the community being policed against. The economic impact is devastating. Women who barely survived before now face impossible choices: work and risk death, or don't work and guarantee starvation. Some try transitioning to factory work, but those jobs were scarce before, and employers aren't eager to hire women fleeing Whitechapel. The workhouses fill with women choosing institutional misery over street terror. Jack's creating poverty as efficiently as he creates corpses. You document the rage alongside the fear. These women aren't just victims cowering in terror. They're furious at Jack, yes, but also at the system that made them vulnerable, at newspapers that sensationalize their deaths while ignoring their lives, at reformers who use the murders to push their agenda of saving women who just want to be safe, at a world that suddenly cares about dead Pr0stitutes but never gave a damn about living ones. The false accusations fly thick as fog. Any man walking Whitechapel at night faces suspicion. But the women know Jack's probably not obviously suspicious. It's the ones who look respectable you got to watch, says Long Liz's friend. The ones we'd go with because they seem safe. That's how he gets close enough. They're profiling before profiling has a name. Trying to think like detectives, because actual detectives aren't thinking about them. The class tensions explode. Wealthy women organize midnight missions to rescue Pr0stitutes from the streets, not understanding they're making things worse. Dragging women to prayer meetings when they need to earn rent money isn't salvation. It's another kind of violence. Some East End women physically block these missions, creating human chains to protect their friends' right to work. It's solidarity born of desperation. Historians still argue about Jack's identity, but you're documenting something more important: how marginalized communities respond to extreme threat. The mutual aid networks strengthen. Women who competed for customers now share resources. Safe houses open their doors regardless of ability to pay. Information flows faster than any telegraph, within hours of each murder. Every working woman in London knows the details that might save their lives. The vigilante groups form despite official discouragement. Groups of local men, dock workers, market porters, the occasional sympathetic shopkeeper, patrol areas the police neglect. They're not all altruistic. Some charge protection fees, but others genuinely try to help, walking women home, checking on those who work alone, making their presence known to deter predators. It's community justice, filling the vacuum left by official indifference. The psychological toll spreads like disease. Women who've worked for years without fear now jump at shadows, Some develop elaborate rituals for protection, specific clothes, routes, prayers. Others self-medicate with jinn until they can barely walk, let alone work safely. The trauma ripples outward, affecting families, children, entire neighborhoods gripped by fear that poverty forces them to face nightly. As autumn turns to winter and the murders stop, though nobody knows they've stopped, the fear continues. You see permanent changes in how London's Pr0stitutes operate. The buddy system remains. The information networks established during the terror continue functioning. Women who found political voice in crisis don't surrender it in calm. Jack failed if his goal was destroying these women. Instead, he forged them into something stronger, a community. The real legacy isn't the mystery or the gore, it's the resilience. Women who society wrote off as worthless proved their worth to each other. They created protection where none existed, fought back against a threat nobody else would fight, survived through solidarity when the world offered only sermons or silence. Jack killed 5 women, but he couldn't ail the spirit of thousands who refused to be terrorized into submission. He made us visible, reflects Annie Chapman's friend on a cold December night. Not how we wanted, but visible anyway. And now they've seen us. We ain't going back to being invisible. We exist. We matter. We protect our own. She's right. The autumn of terror ended, but the community it created endures. Proof that even in horror, humanity finds ways to hope. The gaslights flicker one last time as you walk through Piccadilly in the final hours of 1889, and you can already see the world changing. The women you've spent these months among aren't just surviving anymore. They're organizing, demanding, transforming from Victorian morality's victims into something far more dangerous, political actors. That elderly flower seller who's really selling something else. She's been registering women for the Match Girls strike. The elegant courtesan in her carriage, she's funding labor organizers. The streetwalker hurrying through the shadows, she's carrying messages between union meetings. You've watched these women navigate impossible mathematics, survive state-sanctioned medical assault, build economic empires from nothing, create communities in the face of serial murder. Now they're taking those hard-won skills and applying them to bigger battles. The respectable world wanted them to be fallen angels or reformed sinners. Instead, they're becoming revolutionaries. The connections between Pr0 and the emerging women's movement are complex, often denied by both sides. Respectable suffragettes don't want association with those women. Working Pr0 don't trust middle-class reformers. But in the spaces between, alliances form. Women who learn to read in brothel parlors teach literacy in union halls. Money earned on Bax funds, strikes that bring factory owners to their knees. The vote might seem abstract, but economic power, that's real as rent day. Remember Mrs. Fitzgerald's boarding house from months ago? It's become an unofficial organizing center. The safe where girls stored earnings now holds strike funds. The networks that warned about violent clients carry information about blackleg workers. The protection systems developed for survival transform into frameworks for resistance. When society forces you underground, you learn to thrive in darkness, and darkness hides more than shame. The Match Girls' strike of 1888 showed what's possible. Those girls, many supplementing match factory wages with evening work, stood up to Bryant and May and won. The Pr0stitutes supported them, not openly. That would taint the cause, but with money, safe houses, connections. We know about selling our bodies for pennies. One woman tells you, whether it's to phosphorus or to men, it's all the same poison. Historians still argue whether Victorian Pr0stitutes were victims or agents, as if people can't be both. But watching these women transform survival strategies into political tactics, the answer seems obvious. They were victims of a system designed to exploit them, and they were agents who fought back with every tool available: their bodies, their minds, their solidarity, their rage. The Contagious Diseases Act's repeal wasn't the end, but the beginning. Women who discovered they could fight medical rape started questioning other violations. Why should factory owners pay starvation wages? Why should landlords charge extortionate rents for pest-infested rooms? Why should women have no vote while contributing so much to the economy? The questions spread like fire through tinder dry tenements. You attend a meeting disguised as a sewing circle where prostitutes, factory workers, and even a few adventurous middle-class allies plan next moves. They're organizing rent strikes in buildings owned by slum landlords. They're creating childcare cooperatives so women can work without abandoning children. They're teaching each other to read, to write, to argue, education as revolution, knowledge as weapon. The dock strike of 1889 succeeds partly because dock workers' wives and girlfriends, many working the streets to supplement strike funds, keep families fed while men picket. Nobody mentions this in official histories, but the strike leaders know. Ben Tillett himself quietly thanks the ladies of the night, whose contributions made victory possible. It's solidarity across gender lines. Provisional, but powerful. The new journalism starts documenting these connections. W. T. Stead, who exposed child Pr0stitution in his Maiden Tribute series, now writes about adult women choosing sex work over starvation wages. He's still paternalistic, still moralizing, but at least he's listening. The women use him like they use everything else, strategically, carefully, taking what serves them and discarding what doesn't. You see the future forming in places like Toynbee Hall, where settlement workers live among the poor. Some are appalled by the Pr0stitutes in their midst. Others recognize kindred spirits, women navigating impossible systems with intelligence and courage. Alliances form between university women and street women, each teaching what they know. Oxford Latin meets Whitechapel wisdom, creating something entirely new. The 1890s are coming, and with them, the new woman. She'll ride bicycles, demand votes, claim spaces previously forbidden, but she's building on foundations laid by women who claimed the ultimate forbidden space, the marketplace of desire, and survived. The suffragettes might not acknowledge this genealogy, but it's there in their tactics, their networks, their refusal to be ashamed. As you make your final rounds through London's midnight economy, you collect last testimonies. Tell them we weren't just victims. says the woman in green taffeta from your first night. Tell them we thought, we planned, we fought. Tell them we loved our children and saved our money and helped each other. Tell them we were human. The mainstream narrative will forget these women or remember them only as cautionary tales. Jack's victims will be immortalized, while his thousands of surviving sisters fade into historical silence. The reformers who saved them will be celebrated while the women who saved themselves disappear, but they were here, they mattered, they changed things. The economic structures that created Victorian Pr0stitution are shifting, but not vanishing. Factories will pay better wages, but never enough. Women will gain more respectable employment options, but never sufficient. The fundamental equation, female poverty plus limited options equals sexual commerce, continues with different variables. What changes is the organization, the resistance, the refusal to accept exploitation as natural. You think about all you've witnessed, the midnight streets teeming with complex life, the boarding houses sheltering tomorrow's entrepreneurs, the examination rooms where medical rape sparked feminist fury, the communities that survived serial killers through solidarity. This wasn't a story of fallen women, but of falling systems, economic, medical, legal, social, that women caught and transformed as they fell. The clock strikes 4 in the morning, that liminal hour when night workers head home and day workers rise in the growing light. You see London differently. Every respectable townhouse built on wealth extracted from workers, every church preaching virtue while practicing vice, every institution designed to help women actually helping itself to women's labor, but also every small victory, every saved penny, every woman who survived to fight another day. These women's legacy isn't in monuments or mentioned in textbooks. It's in labor laws that protect workers, in women's refuges that actually refuge, in the radical idea that selling your body for sex is no more degrading than selling it for factory work. It's in every woman who refuses shame for surviving however she can. The city wakes around you, respectable London preparing for respectable business, built on foundations of precisely the exploitation it condemns, but underneath, in the boarding houses and meeting rooms, in the networks that span from Whitechapel to Westminster, the women you've met are planning, organizing, refusing to disappear. They've been visible all along. Society just chose not to see. Now they're making themselves impossible to ignore as dawn breaks fully, painting the Thames in shades of hope and mud. You realize these midnight walks have shown you more than Victorian Pr0stitution. They've revealed the birth of movements, the forging of communities, the transformation of survival into resistance, the women of the night. It turns out we're lighting fires that would burn well into the new century and beyond. The fog lifts slowly as you walk back through streets that have become familiar in their strangeness. Dawn transforms everything. The gaslight fades. The shadows retreat. And the night world you've inhabited these long months begins its daily disappearance. But you know better now. Those women hurrying home aren't vanishing. They're changing costumes, assuming daytime roles, continuing lives that respectable society pretends don't exist. You pass the Haymarket one last time. nearly empty now except for flower sellers setting up for the morning trade. Some of them worked different trades just hours ago. The transformation is seamless, from women of the night to women of the day. Same bodies, different battles. The Victorian tendency to categorize, to separate good from bad women, crumbles in the face of these fluid identities. Your feet carry you past all the landmarks of this hidden city. The examination rooms where medical violence sparked revolution, the boarding houses where mutual aid flourished, the theaters where respectability and its opposite danced together. Each corner holds stories that official histories will never record. Each building shelters complexities that moral simplicities can't contain. The personal testimonies echo as morning birds begin their chorus. We're not angels or demons, just women trying to survive. Tell them we mattered. Show them we were human. The voices blend, Irish accents and London drawls, educated tones and street wisdom, young hope and old resignation. Together, they form a chorus that sings a different song than the one society wrote for them. You think about the children sleeping safely because their mothers worked dangerous streets, the businesses built from the ground up by women who started with nothing but themselves, the communities that faced down serial killers and state violence with equal courage. These aren't stories of degradation, but of determination, not of falling, but of rising, not of shame, but of survival. The morning mist off the Thames carries the smell of coal smoke and possibility. London is waking to another day of commerce and propriety, built on the same inequalities that created the night world you've explored. But changes are stirring in union halls and meeting rooms, in the growing suffrage movement and labor organizing. The lessons learned on midnight streets are being applied to daylight battles. The women you've met aren't passive victims waiting for rescue or reform. They're active agents in their own lives and in the larger movements reshaping society. Their strategies for survival become tactics for resistance. Their networks of mutual support transform into frameworks for political organizing. Their refusal to accept shame becomes a demand for rights. As full daylight floods the city, you realize the artificial divide between night and day, between respectable and fallen, between worthy and unworthy poor, serves only those who profit from the division. The women who cross those boundaries nightly know better. They've seen respectability's hypocrisies up close, felt morality's violence on their bodies, survived charity's cruel mercies. The legacy of Victorian London's Pr0stitutes isn't in the sensational stories or moral panics they inspired. It's in every woman who refuses to accept that poverty should mean powerlessness. It's in every community that creates its own support systems when society fails them. It's in every movement that recognizes survival itself as a form of resistance. Your journey through this midnight world ends where it began, but you're changed by what you've witnessed. The comfortable narratives about fallen women and necessary evils have dissolved like fog in sunlight. What remains is harder to categorize but more honest. Human beings navigating impossible circumstances with intelligence, courage, and occasional grace. The city settles into its daytime rhythms, but you know the night world hasn't vanished. It's just waiting. In 12 hours, The dance will begin again. Women will pin up their hair, apply their evening faces, step out into streets that offer danger and opportunity in equal measure. They'll survive another night through wit and solidarity, building tomorrow on the foundations of today's endurance. These weren't fallen women, they were flying women, soaring despite society's attempts to clip their wings. They turned the very attempts to control them into opportunities for autonomy. They made the streets that were supposed to be their shame into spaces of economic independence and community power. Sleep calls you now, as it calls them, but their stories resist slumber. They demand remembering, retelling, reframing, not as cautionary tales or titillating scandals, but as human stories of how people survive when survival itself is rebellion, how communities form when society denies you membership, how love persists when the world insists you're incapable of it. Close your eyes and see them still, the woman in green, taffeta, negotiating her rate with banker's precision, the mother walking her children to school before beginning her evening shift, the landladies creating safe spaces in a hostile city, the lovers defying every prohibition to build lives together, the revolutionaries disguised as Pr0stitutes, or perhaps Pr0stitutes revealed as revolutionaries. They were never just selling their bodies. They were selling their labor in the only market that would buy it. Then, using the proceeds to purchase freedoms society tried to deny them, they were economists and entrepreneurs, mothers and organizers, lovers and fighters. They were human beings insisting on their humanity in a world determined to deny it. The final lesson of these midnight walks isn't about Victorian Pr0stitution at all. It's about resilience in the face of systematic oppression. It's about communities creating their own definitions of respectability, safety, and success. It's about the power that comes from refusing shame, from supporting each other, from surviving despite everything. As sleep finally takes you, one last image lingers. Dawn breaking over London, painting the sky in shades of hope. Somewhere in this vast city, women are counting their earnings, planning their futures, caring for their children, organizing for change. They've survived another night. They'll survive whatever comes next. They've been surviving all along, and in that survival lies the seed of transformation. Sweet dreams now, but when you wake, remember, history is written by the victors, but it's made by the survivors. And these women, they survived everything Victorian society threw at them, then used that survival to help build something better. Their legacy lives in every fight for fair wages, every demand for bodily autonomy, every insistence that poverty should not mean powerlessness. They were never fallen women. They were rising women, and their rise continues still.